Hello, everyone, and welcome to Franz's Real Estate Facts, episode 8. It is now mid-March, or not exactly mid-March, or something like that. Anyways, I am here today with Christina Frey, who is super awesome. I love talking to her. She's really smart. She is the owner of Christina Frey Insurance Agency, and she is licensed to sell all kinds of life and health related insurance products. And on top of just being an amazing insurance agent, another thing that Christina does is she is a member of the National Aging in Place Council. And so actually, I will let Christina explain a little bit about what the National Aging in Place Council is, NAIPC, and why might I want somebody like her on my show?
Frant'z, thank you so much for that warm introduction. I really appreciate you having me as a guest on your podcast. And yeah, I have been a part of the National Aging in Place chapter for not quite 2 years now. And one of the reasons that I felt it was important to join this organization is because their focus is really on helping mature adults age in place well. And for the majority of my career, I have focused on helping mature individuals, the senior market, to really plan for as they age with different insurance products and solutions. And the National Aging in Place Council really tied everything together because we really focus on all the aspects of helping the family, to have the quality of life as they enter, their golden years. And what I wanted to talk to today was some of the things I run into with people when I'm talking to them, and really provide some tips as to what homeowners can do or look for as they are trying to age in place well. And I think that'll be a fun topic for us to kind of go back and forth on today.
Absolutely. Thank you. Thank you so much. So you said you have some tips. I assume there's like maybe 5 of them because I did write the description. Um, yep, 5. Um,
5 tips, yes. And the reason I came up with these tips is because when I was meeting with my clients and talking to them, I found that they weren't often considering, when we talked about their extended care needs and the options they have, they weren't really considering what that really looked like. And so the tips I have for homeowners today is 5, and how they can age in place well while they're, heading towards, their golden years again. So the first tip I have is they need to really plan an exit strategy from their current home. Often when I'm meeting with a husband and wife or a family, they're still in their large homes, the homes they had when they raised their kids, and it's really becoming burdensome to them. For example, I have a family member of mine who was living in a 3-bedroom house, 2-bath, big yard, front and back, and it became hard for him to keep up with the landscaping or the maintenance of the home. And as I'm talking to my clients, I find that no one's really they've taken all this time to plan for their insurance as they age, their retirement income, their nest egg, but they haven't really taken the time to consider how that is going to be in their current home and if it's practical for them to stay there. So I think step number 1 is really having an exit strategy of when is the right time to maybe leave this home and transition into something, smaller for them. And I'm curious, Frant'z, in your industry, I know you probably work with a lot of folks. What is, what do you find when you're working with someone who's in a large home and needs to transition? What are some of the obstacles they're facing as to why they're not ready to leave that home?
well, I mean, I think there's a lot of different components, but there's really 2 major ones. The first is emotional and the second is practical. So the emotional component really is I love this house. I raised my kids in this house. I really want my kids to have this house, and I don't want my kids to lose this home that they grew up in. And so there's really a strong emotional component to it. And the other component is practical. So when you have a home, maybe a 3,000 square foot home that's 4 bedrooms, 2 baths, 2 stories, and you've lived there for maybe 20, 30 years, then you got a lot of stuff, right? There's just a lot of stuff that accumulates. And then sometimes there's even more stuff that accumulates because maybe there's a bedroom or something that's not being used. And so now that bedroom gets to be used as storage, which means that the stuff kind of multiplies. So that's really overwhelming for my clients when they're thinking of downsizing from this home to a smaller home. So that's really something that's an obstacle for them. And the other thing I think, on again the emotional side, is a lot of realtors don't necessarily have the training to work with people on an emotional level. And I have a degree in neuroscience. I worked as a psychoeducational counselor. So that sort of emotional space is one that I really operate in. And I'm really good at listening to people in an emotional space. And I think, at least in terms of the emotional aspect, that is a burden that I can lift for them. And I'm really not in it to just like, okay, well, here's the deal. We need to get a deal done and we need to sell your house. It's, I will hear your emotional concerns. I will really help you work through that. And I will address the practical concerns because I have an awesome network of people like you who know in a really deep way what sort of issues they need to look at.
Yeah, you nailed it. I agree with you. It is a very emotional decision. And that is probably the largest obstacle that I find when talking with couples about leaving their home. And, it brings me to tip 2 is, they've got to talk to their family. And, if it's important to leave the home in the family, then maybe it needs to be more of a sales transaction to a family member, or potentially maybe moving title to that other family member they want to keep, or, some other solution that they have. And I'm curious, do you run into families who are wanting to keep their home, and actually, as they transition down to maybe active retirement communities or assisted living facilities, do you find them wanting to often transfer title to their children? Or
as you said, having that conversation is really important. In some cases, yeah, they do want to transfer title to their children, and obviously, in that case, they should work with a trust and estates attorney and a tax attorney and also a real property attorney like me, who can help them figure out what's the best way of structuring that. And I think a lot of times kids surprisingly have either moved on, or they've moved out of the state, or they have different lives, or they have their own houses or whatever. And they really say, look, mom, dad, we really love this house. It was great. It was nice to grow up in. And we also think that it's time for you to sell it because we don't want to deal with these memories. And I think that a lot of particularly children, and I can kind of look at my own life because I'm at the age where my parents are kind of starting to think about these things. There is an emotional element for me as a child to kind of go back to the house that I grew up in, maybe after my parents have passed or moved on, or maybe can no longer be in that house, and figuring out what to do with the house. And so by them selling it, that's actually a burden that's lifted off of the children, or that's lifted off of me. And it would be really helpful to just have that conversation. And maybe a realtor can facilitate that conversation because they understand some of the sort of real estate related elements that the family members might not.
sure. Yeah. No, I think you're correct. I think about my own family. When my mom passed, my father was still living in the family home, they had lived in since since the 70s. And when it came time for us as a family to approach the subject of whether or not it was a good idea for my father to stay in that home, we decided it might be best for him to move into a smaller place and really live out the retirement dreams him and my mom had, which they always dreamed they were going to live in Little Italy. My father, he's my stepfather, but he's my dad. He's Italian, so they were going to live in Little Italy, and I can't remember if they were going to sell the house or rent the house. But when my mom passed, it was clear that my father felt he had to stay in the home. And I think he felt he had to stay there because that was the home. And I remember one day coming over, and I was very frank with him. And I said, Dad, you got to get out of this place and move to Little Italy, because you can't stop dreaming. You got to still fulfill that dream. And it was very emotional for him. And during the process of packing things up and having to get rid of a lot of stuff, because he was going from a 3-bedroom house with a full backyard, tools and landscaping equipment. It was tough. And I remember when we were doing the estate sale, he was there in the morning, and all of a sudden he just got really overwhelmed and was like, I can't deal with this. I'm like, you need to go golf. I'm like, we'll handle it. Come back in 6 hours. And when he came back in 6 hours, of course, everything in the house was gone that we intended to sell. And I just remember him walking through and just thinking, it's gone. It's like, it was definitely a feeling of loss, I think, and almost. And it took a while as he transitioned into his new home to really feel like that place was his home. And it was very, very emotional, just like you're saying. And I think that's why it is important to have the conversation with family, because my sisters and I were all for, just like you said, Dad, time to leave the house, do something else. And I think parents a lot of times think they do have to stay in the house and preserve it for the kids. And that's really an outdated way of thinking. Most of the time, kids are doing better than the parents these days. They've got their own houses and they don't really need the house, or they live somewhere else. So it doesn't become practical at all. Yeah. Which brings me to my third tip, which you also touched on. And I love that we're thinking already on the same path. But when people are considering, their exit strategy for their home and looking at extended care needs, and, they often don't think about what's really practical for their care. Like I had another client who, just to get to the meeting, I had to walk up 3 flights of stairs to get to the front door. And I remember when I was in there, the client, they were doing their long-term care insurance, and we're talking about where they'd like their care to be. And he said that he wanted to stay home as long as possible. And I said, John, we have to be realistic. I just came up 3 flights of stairs and I'm in pretty good shape. I'm in my 40s. I said, how are you going to get up those stairs as you're aging and maybe you're having some mobility issues? And so I think that's another thing, is a lot of times people, when they're considering leaving their home or staying in their home, they have to be realistic as whether or not that home is going to really allow them to age well in place. And I'm sure you see this a lot in your industry, of course, where people are needing to downsize from multi-level homes or homes with, stairs and so forth. What are your thoughts on that, Frant'z? What are you seeing?
Well, I definitely see that people want to leave 2-story homes because they are impractical or there are lots of stairs. And, a lot of times it really happens after, the knee replacement surgery or the hip replacement surgery or the back surgery. And it's like, okay, I cannot go up and down these stairs anymore. And, one of the things that I also noticed, because I'm, as I'm also an attorney. One of the things that I also notice is just predatory people going after elderly or older individuals to buy their homes. And, when you're maybe in your 40s or your 50s, well, not so much your 40s, but like maybe when you're in your 50s or 60s, when the kids have all moved out and they're done and they're not going to come back home and they're just doing what they're doing, people might not target you as much as if you're 70 or 80. And that's just kind of, that's a reality of just understanding that you need to have your full mental faculties when you're going through this transaction. And it really might not be a situation where you say, okay, I'm going to sell the house now, but there is really value in, for example, I had one set of clients, I'd worked with them for 2 years and they had known me for like 10 years and they kind of knew who I was ethically as a person. They understood how I operated. I'd had a relationship with them where they knew they could trust me. So when it came time to sell their house, they knew that I was going to take really good care of them because we'd established that relationship. So establishing a relationship with a realtor, understanding them as a business person and understanding them sort of as a person generally can save you from really, frankly, what are very predatory sort of investors and realtors who just like target the elderly population and say, this is going to be an easy transaction, this is going to be an easy deal, and they really don't have their best interests at heart.
Uh, I agree with you. I mean, I hear about, seniors being scammed constantly. And it's really sad, that we live in a world where we have to be so cautious about who we're dealing with. And I think that's one of the reasons why tip one, having a good exit strategy is key. And part of that is really establishing relationships with people they plan to work with, having a trusted lender that is going to help them, maybe get the loan for the new place they're moving into, having a realtor who is, professional and able to work with them and understand their needs, having an escrow company that's not going to overcharge them and rip them off, having, just the knowledge or the help to be able to understand the paperwork that's put in front of them. Again, I had another circumstance, I think I shared with you last time we talked, where this client was buying, moving into a smaller condo from their home. And I don't know if this is common practice, and this is something you can answer after I tell you what happened. Maybe it's because of the pandemic, but basically paperwork upon paperwork of disclosures and HOAs and special assessments and documents that this individual had no clue what it really meant or how it would affect them were being sent via DocuSign with no one to explain the documents. And I remember as the client was telling me this story, asking for my help, asking about my expertise. And I'm an expert in insurance, and yeah, I bought a few properties here and there, but there's by no means would I ever say I'm an expert in real estate or real estate law, or maybe understanding the whole entire escrow process and so forth. So I was really appalled, and I asked the gentleman, I said, where's your realtor? Why isn't someone here explaining this to you? And he said, well, I didn't know they needed to do that. And I said, well, they're getting paid on this transaction, and they should be offering some sort of value or assistance for the compensation they're receiving. And I told him, I said, I remember the last time I bought a home, which was prior to the pandemic. I said, I had a meeting at escrow where I sat in the escrow office and they went through all the paperwork and made sure I understood what I was signing. I said, are they not doing that? Is there like a video conference that's happening? And so here this gentleman was ready to just sign off on a bunch of these things because his realtor was telling him, just sign it. We have a deadline. Get it signed. We have a deadline. If you want the place, this is the best place. Sign, sign, sign. And of course, being an insurance agent, we have a lot of paperwork people have to sign, and you want to make sure before someone puts their John Hancock on a line that they understand what they are agreeing to and what they're contractually binding themselves to. So I actually took time out of my day to help this person read through the documents. And it took a while. There was a lot of documents, and in the HOA minutes, it was just like a ton of information. And I finally told the client, I said, you know what? Let me take this home. I'll read it and I'll get back to you. Well, in those documents that he was being told to just sign, sign, sign was all these special assessments that were being charged to the homeowners, and to the point where on the unit he was looking at buying, it was in the last year, almost $13,000 in special assessments had been charged to his unit. And I asked him, I said, we need to find out what's going on, and come to find out, I called the realtor with him, and the realtor said, oh, it's just some construction they're doing. It's nothing, you know. Well, I dug a little deeper and come to find out it was a major construction project of water damage getting into the balconies and causing unforeseen damage, dry rot, and structural issues all throughout the condominium complex. And what was happening is every time the contractor opened up a wall, they'd have to rebid because they couldn't see the damage. They had to rebid. And so every year these people were being charged special assessments to pick up the extra cost because the reserves weren't properly funded. So I was, you know, advocating for my client at this point, and I was floored. I was like, why didn't your realtor catch this? And I guess my question to you, Frant'z, is in the role of that situation, whose role is it really to make sure that the home buyer, I guess in this case, understands what he's signing before he signs it?
You know, that's actually a really complicated question. And I sit on the Real Property Law Section Executive Committee of the California Lawyers Association. And that's actually a discussion that we were having recently, because I'm a member of their brokers and licensees practice area. And so the conversation that we were having is like, what really is the responsibility of a real estate agent or a realtor versus that of an attorney? And that's really complicated, because as soon as you sort of look at a document, if you look at the special assessments, then you can tell your client as a real estate agent, this is what this says. But as a real estate agent, you really can't say this is the legal implication of what you're reading. That kind of falls into the area of unauthorized practice of law. And first of all, if you give bad advice, then as a real estate agent, you're in a really bad position. And as a client, if you're it's kind of like, I don't know, getting medical advice from your plumber. Your plumber might know something about medicine, and they might know, something about how different sort of things connect and what might happen. But the reality is, you need to go to a doctor to get some real answers about what's going on medically. And the same is true of law, right? So realtors are not lawyers, and they really can't tell you what's going on legally, which is something that I can do. That is value that I can actually provide. And even if I'm not providing necessarily legal advice, if I'm, setting that boundary and saying I'm not going to provide legal advice, what I can say is you need to go talk to a lawyer, because I know that there are legal issues here, which a real estate agent who's not a lawyer wouldn't see. And I also wanted to go back to your previous point about, are these disclosures required, or is it pandemic related? And there are two things. The first joke is every disclosure piece of paper that you sign was born of a lawsuit, right? It is the disclosure is the child of a lawsuit and a settlement agreement or a judgment. So if you got the disclosure, that means that somebody was sued on it at some point. That's what that means. And the second thing about disclosures is, you do need to read them, and you do need to understand them. And especially with condos, like if you got a condo and there's an assessment, there are actual formulas for like what is actually a healthy condominium reserve, and are these reserves good for what's going on. And when you look at special assessments, some special assessments are acceptable, and you also have to maybe look at the HOA documents to see what's covered under the HOA fees versus what's going to be covered as a special assessment. On the buying side, right? Not so much the selling side, but on the buying side, if you are a buyer, these are things that you need to look at, because that is legal exposure for your client later on.
Right. Yeah, and that was the thing, is I think in this situation, the client didn't really understand the disclosures at all on the HOAs, didn't understand that, he was going to be charged more special assessments. It was very clearly indicated that, yes, more special assessments were coming in 2021 and 2022. And And that brings me to my other tip is, which we just kind of touched on, is the importance of finding a qualified realtor to handle the transaction. And I find that a lot of people don't, they take more time to buy a car, and pick what car they want or research the car they want than actually researching the real estate agent maybe they're going to do business with. And a lot of times it's, oh, so and so in the family does real estate, use him. Or, hey, I've got a friend who helped me, use him. But no one really, I find, takes the time to interview the professional that is going to be potentially handling one of the largest transactions that they deal with in their life financially. And I find that when you have a qualified real estate agent helping you, whether on the selling end or on the buying end, that a lot of these issues don't arise. You have someone who's got your true back and your interests for you and advocating for you. And I think it's also important to find someone who knows the area well that you're trying to relocate to. So they know market prices and comps and what, is a fair price per square footage that you should be paying. And I'm curious, Frant'z, when you deal with your clients, I obviously know what sets you apart, from other realtors, but I think it's important that you really share with the group today as we're live as to why someone like me, of course, would refer someone to you and what sets you apart from other realtors.
Well, I think so. First of all, thank you for asking the question. And I think there's a couple of things. One, there is the legal component. Obviously, I mean, buying and selling a house is a legal transaction. I mean, full stop. That's what it is. It is a legal transaction. And going through a legal transaction without a lawyer is basically like getting surgery without a doctor. Is that okay? Will you die? Maybe, maybe not. Um, is that a risk you really want to take? Maybe, maybe not.
Definitely not.
Right? um, and I don't, but the thing is, I think people really just don't understand. Like, the law is really complex and people don't necessarily understand exactly what the complexities are. So that really sets me apart. And when we think about lawyers, I think the exposure that people have to lawyers is typically, I don't know, CSI, or well, it's not CSI, that's something different. But those kinds of TV shows. So like there's Suits and there's what is it? Law and Order and all these sorts of things where you see lawyers kind of playing around in the West Wing and JAG and all those shows. But the reality is there are not that many litigators, right? Most lawyers are people like me who are transactional attorneys, and it doesn't make for good TV. I mean,
not really exciting, huh?
it's not good TV, but it's really like reading documents and negotiating and figuring it out. And there are three skills that lawyers bring to the table. Good lawyers bring to the table: thinking strategically, dealing with complexity, and negotiating.
Yes.
Right? And that's part of a real estate transaction. And that's really important. And the last is doing research. I hear what you said about like somebody who knows the area, and that's great and that's important. And on top of somebody knowing the area, it needs to be somebody who understands what research they need to do in order to help their clients. So, if you're looking, one really important statistic is just like what percentage of list price are people getting in a market? So if they walk into the market and they say, okay, I see houses at this price, if you're a realtor, like I will do research on what percentage on average of the list price do sellers get. If that number is over the list price, then you know that the list price is not what you're going to be paying. You have to pay more. And then in other circumstances, you know that the list prices, if you're paying less, then you know that the list price you're going to pay less. So these are real negotiating tools for doing research and understanding what you need to understand and look at. And one of the things that I will say is that if you have an agent who says, "Oh, I really know the area and I follow this market and I know all of this stuff," sometimes they get kind of lazy in terms of the actual research side. And then they are not actually representing your interests as well as they could, because before I do a transaction, I always pull stats. And I do I oftentimes do very granular statistics. So in one situation, I was in a market where there was one particular agent who tended to have most of the listings. And so for this buyer, what I did was I actually looked at what percentage of list price did this agent get on average over their career in this area, so that they could understand what are you actually going to be paying, because more than likely you're going to be dealing with this listing agent.
Mhm.
So these are all kinds of value that I provide to my clients so that they understand, this is what I'm getting myself into.
Yeah, and this is where I think you and I are very similar on. I feel the same way in my insurance practice is, there's a lot of insurance agents out there. And what I have found though is there's very few that actually are qualified to do the work that needs to be done. And I feel the same thing in your industry is there are a ton of realtors. I mean, they're all over the place. I see them all the time. Okay. But there are very few that actually, I think, are truly specializing or have the ability to help the client from point A to B to C and all the way to Z if they need to. And, my client, if he had had someone like you helping him through the process, I think he may have potentially not been in the situation he got himself in, where he actually had to back out of escrow and tied up some of his money for a while. And it really, if anything, discouraged him from wanting to continue the search. He just felt like he didn't know enough to maybe be buying a home. And I don't really think that was on him. It was the first time this person had ever bought a home for himself. And I think, had he had an agent like you on his side who could really understand his needs and understand that not that he was ignorant, he just didn't have the know-how of what he was doing from the beginning. Like if you knew someone was a brand new home buyer, had never bought a home in his entire life or dealt with a transaction, are you going to start at step in with him? Or are you going to start at step A?
Right, exactly.
It's like, for me, it's like if I jump into an appointment where someone wants to, maybe learn about long-term care insurance, I can't go straight to, what the plan covers and what it costs, because I need to address first, what is long-term care? What are the risks of you needing it? Does it even make sense for you to have it? There's a series of steps you have to take before you can make the sale. And I think in this case, again, had this client worked with someone like you, I think you would have had the understanding to know, hey, I need to make sure this person's first educated on this whole process of what's actually going to happen. What are the steps we have to take to get him into the house that, he's planning to age in place at. And, it brings me to my last tip, just to, wrap things up a little bit. But I really encourage my clients, when they're looking at how they're going to age in place well, whether that's in their current home or new home, is they really need to, before they make their decision, look at all their options. And, it's not just a matter of, maybe buying another smaller home or a one-level home or something more manageable. We have a lot of opportunities here in Southern California and in our nation, where sometimes another opportunity is moving to like an active retirement community. And I find this is often good, especially for my clients who maybe are widows or maybe they're single, is as people age, one of the ways that causes them to not age well is they become lonely and depressed. They don't have the companionship, because maybe they've lost their loved one, or maybe their kids live across the country and they're not getting visits. They don't get to see the grandkids. And so a lot of times when I'm talking to my clients and they're considering a move, I tell them to keep their options open to some of these active retirement communities, because they provide the social stimuli that a lot of these people might need, or just a lot of people in their same demographic, age group, or maybe even financial situation where they're going to be a part of this community. And I think that's something a lot of people think, oh, I'm just going to we're so used to being in our homes and separated from everyone. We're all in our little compartments. you know.
Mhm.
I think when they consider an active retirement community, or if they're starting to need care already, maybe even an assisted living facility, but something that has different levels of care that they can move up as they age, is very important. Because I don't know how you feel about it. I mean, I've probably moved about 10 times in my life so far, and I can tell you, I cannot stand moving. Like, if you ask me to move, I'm like, no, it's like I dread it. I don't want to move. And it's very traumatic. It is a major life event change for a lot of people. And it's disruptive a lot of times to,
Mhm.
life. And so I definitely encourage folks, for my last tip is consider your move when you're aging in place to maybe the spot that's going to work, to the end, that's going to get you, to be able to manage your care well as you're needing more care. And that's really my last tip of the day is consider all your options. And Frant'z, I'm curious, because I know you work this market. What is your experience with people who are aging? How often are they choosing like active retirement communities now versus maybe just a smaller home?
I think there's a lot of different types of people. I think a lot of people do like the independence of having their own home and being able to live in their own home. And I think this whole concept of active retirement communities, it's actually a little new, realistically speaking. It's not a really common thought that people have. So I think a lot of people are thinking more like, let's downsize, let's, move into something a little bit smaller. And I definitely hear people who do say, I want to live around, people, right? I want to live around just like the neighbors, and that there's kids, and that there's other people who just are in different life stages. I like having the different life stages around me.
Mhm.
Um, and then the other consideration in terms of those types of communities is, what are your kids going to do with it? If, like, if you buy a house, you can sell it, right? I mean, your kids can sell it, or whatever. And then if you buy it in those types of communities, is it possible for you to move into it? Like, can your kids move into it? If you do pass on before your kids are old enough to move into it, what's going to happen? So those are some additional layers of consideration to have, depending on what they're doing. And the other thing is, depending on the actual community, some of them have like buy-in requirements, and the fees to live there might be very high. There's
Sure.
like there's the V in UTC, which is pretty. I mean, it's pretty well known. It's also extremely expensive. I think
Mhm.
the units themselves are expensive. I think it's something like $2,500 to $3,000 a month to stay there, on top
Mhm.
of a buy-in.
Right.
Um, so these are all things to really think about when you're deciding if you want to.
Yeah, most certainly. And, I find that these communities are, more common and, a lot of more retirement friendly states. Like you see a lot of them in Arizona, Nevada, Florida. It seems like California is just starting to, Palm Springs, you'll see some of them and so forth. But it definitely seems to be in areas that the mature market is, moving to. And a lot of times
Mhm.
they're moving to these areas because obviously taxation, they're trying to preserve their money as long as possible. And, you know, obviously here in California, we have higher taxes than other states that are a little bit more
Right.
friendly for them. So, but yeah, those are my 5 tips. And I think it's been some good discussion back and forth. And
Yeah, this is great. I really appreciate your coming on the show. And, Chris, one of the things that I will say about Christina, and one of the reasons why I do enjoy working with her, is that she does look for experts, right? So, and, in the industry that she works in, sort of long-term care insurance, life insurance, health insurance products, all those sorts of things, really having a solid network of people who can help is helpful, and really gives her an edge on providing good service. So it's not just, and the other thing is, she's able to identify issues that come up just because she has professional partners like me, like, attorneys, financial planners. And just by talking to these people, all of us will hear, oh, this is an issue in my industry. So then when the client brings that up, then we can say, okay, you said this issue. I know that this is an issue. You need to talk to an expert. And that just provides a much higher level of service than somebody who's just stuck in their own little niche without a broad swath of professional partners that they can really look to and refer and talk to when they have anything that comes up. So, Christina, I really want to thank you for being on the show. You are awesome. I
Thank
really
you.
appreciate your asking me questions too that I can answer.
Put you on the
Um,
spot.
yeah, definitely. And, if people want to get a hold of you, how can they get a hold of you?
The best way really to connect with me is through my website. I have a lot of interactive tools where you can, fill out a form to, talk with me. You can book a time on my calendar. So that would be Frey, Frey, insures, freyinsures.com. Just like my
FreyInsures.com.
name. Yeah. Sorry.
Awesome.
A little sometimers just kicked in for a minute. I was like, what?
Yeah. All right. Well, FreyInsures.com. Absolutely. I'll stick it in the chat or not the chat. I'll stick it in the comments once we're done. And I really want to thank you for being here. Christina, you have been amazing and awesome. This has been a great discussion. And really, I would encourage anybody who needs anything related to long-term care or even just like some information about aging in place to reach out to Christina and, have her talk about the ways that you can achieve these goals. It's a goal and it's something that you have to work towards. So, thank you so much for being with us, Christina. And next week, we will have another awesome guest who will talk about more awesome things. So thank you so much. And I will
Thanks,
see you next
Franz.
week.
All right.
Bye.
Bye-bye, everyone.
Bye.